In today's video, we have a variety of NHL news to discuss, including some updates on some NHL injuries, some NHL waiver claims, as well as some updated NHL trade rumors. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news and updates here to discuss today from a variety of NHL teams. So let's kick things off with defenseman Luca Sbisa being claimed on waivers by the Winnipeg Jets. Now, we had mentioned yesterday he was prepared to sign a contract with the Anaheim Ducks, but in order to be brought up to their NHL roster, he had to clear waivers first, and he did not make it that far. So they signed him and lost them all in the same 24-hour period here, and now he's a member of the Winnipeg Jets. Now, it's also been revealed by NHL insiders that it looks like he was actually speaking to the Jets about a potential contract with them as well. Some speculate that maybe the Jets let him sign elsewhere and then put the waiver claim in so that the same thing didn't happen to them. Obviously, the Jets were in a situation where, they're without Dustin Byfuglien. They've also got some injuries on their blue line, like Nathan Beaulieu. Tucker Pullman's been injured a little bit too. So they're certainly depleted back there. They could use some experience. And even though Sbisa's not a high-end top defenseman, he certainly has a lot of NHL experience and certainly could be a help, at least on a short-term basis, while they get a longer, better picture here of what their blue line situation is going to be. So the Winnipeg Jets have now added Luca Sbisa. Now, speaking of veteran NHL defenseman looking to make an NHL return, that takes us to former Montreal Canadian defenseman Andrei Markov. Now, it was made quite clear during this offseason between himself and his newly hired agent, Alan Walsh, that he wanted to return to the NHL and that Montreal was his first choice of destinations where he would want it to sign and get back to playing hockey in the NHL. He's not that far off from hitting 1,000 NHL games, which is a big milestone as well. But then later in September, we heard comments from Marc Bergevin saying that the Habs were no longer interested, that his contract was up a couple of years before that. They couldn't come to an agreement. He went in a different direction as a player, went to the KHL, and since that time, the last couple of years, the Habs are going in a new direction, and they don't want to take on another veteran defenseman who could possibly end up taking away playing time between this year and next over a lot of their younger players like Juleson, Mete, and Josh Brook, and Romanov, who's expected to be coming over hopefully soon, possibly next season. So he really wasn't interested in bringing Markov back into the mix. And it had been reported that he'd been training and waiting for any other NHL opportunities to come up. And so far, nothing has materialized. So he is returning to the KHL. He signed a temporary contract to go back to the KHL. Now, I know most KHL contracts do not allow an out clause to go to the National Hockey League. I'm not quite sure exactly the terms of this deal. It was worded as a temporary contract. So I would think it's possible if he gets an NHL opportunity, he may be able to leave and go back. But I'm not quite 100% clear on that. If we get further clarification, then I'll certainly update you on the status of that. But for right now, Andrei Markov's NHL return is at least on hold, possibly not happening at all, and he is going to be returning to play in the KHL for at least the short term here. Now, staying with the theme of veteran defensemen, as we also noted, longtime Red Wing defenseman Jonathan Ericsson was placed on waivers. He had been on the injured reserve list to start the season and was ready to come back. Still dealing with a lot of multitude of health issues here that he's barely battled over the last little while, but he is able to play, and he did clear waivers and has been assigned to the Grand Rapids Griffins of the American Hockey League, where he was expected to make his debut, I think, last night, I do believe. So Jonathan Ericsson, for going to be 10 years in between playing American Hockey League games for Grand Rapids, which I think they were saying on the broadcast was a record as well. Obviously, last night the Red Wings were in town to play the Ottawa Senators, so they were discussing Ericsson's situation and whether or not he'll actually be back in the NHL or not. It's really unclear. It looks as though that the Red Wings were trying to trade him and find a home for him, were unable to do so, which is what led to him going on waivers. They obviously have a lot of other defensemen that they want to play ahead of him right now, so he'll go down to the American Hockey League and see if there's any other takers or not. I mean, obviously there's going to be teams looking for veteran defensemen as we approach the deadline going into the playoffs. The Red Wings are not a team that's likely expected to be in the playoff hunt, so it does make sense that they would certainly try again to offer him up to move him along. He is on the last year of his contract here as well, so obviously Jonathan Ericsson, like I mentioned in yesterday's video when he was first placed on waivers, certainly it is possible his NHL career could be over. He might get a short-lived return. It's hard to say, but either way, I think he's done really, really well for himself, considering the fact he was drafted way back in 2002. He's now 35 years old. He's played the NHL for quite some time, and in that draft in 2002, he was actually the final draft pick of the draft that year, which is quite remarkable. And back then, they actually had 9 rounds in the NHL draft, not 7. He was actually drafted 291st overall, so to even make the NHL at all, let alone get over a decade in in the NHL as a regular player is certainly quite an accomplishment. So I guess we'll see what happens with Eriksson, if this is the end of the road for him, or if he'll get another opportunity and the Red Wings will be able to trade him later in the season. Now, as I mentioned, the Red Wings were in town to play the Ottawa Senators last night, and there was obviously a lot of talk around the Senators in the last few days. The fact that Pierre Dorion looking to add some forward help to the team. They've obviously been struggling quite mightily here to start the year, which to most of us, really, like I said, isn't a big surprise. The Senators were not really expected to be all that good this year, but I guess in the Senators' management eyes, they were hoping to be at least a little bit better and a little bit further along than what they are here today. And obviously, there's some concerns that a lot of their youngsters need more time and seasoning in the American Hockey League, and they certainly don't want to rush some of these players. They want to give them ample time to develop so that they don't, have any issues with their development longer term. So they want to bring in somebody else in the forward group who can certainly help out like they did with Vladislav Namestnikov. Now, one thing that's likely going to make that a little bit more urgent here is that they've got a couple of forward injuries that they've just announced going to be out for some time. We already knew there was an injury to Artem Anisimov. Looks like he will be out for probably a week or two. And they've also recently announced that Colin White's going to be out for about 4 to 6 weeks with some type of a hip flexor issue as well. So that's certainly not good news. White had been playing quite well, a consistent member of their top 6, often playing with Brady Tkachuk. So for right now, they've called up Logan Brown, who obviously was a high selection in the first round a few years back and has yet to really find himself a regular NHL playing time, a regular spot. He's got a few games under his belt, but for the most part, he's been playing in the American Hockey League after his junior career came to an end. So we'll see what he can do. They'll probably try to be a little bit patient here over the next few games, but the Senators' situation to add forward help will certainly increase quite a bit. And there's also been some talk about some other players who likely could be moved later in the year, since the Senators, as we know, likely are not going to be a playoff team barring some sort of miracle, and they have some unrestricted free agents who certainly could bring back a decent return, perhaps. Nothing like last year, of course, when they traded guys like Duchesne and Stone and Dzingel, and they had that mass exodus of all those top guys where they got some pretty significant returns. But in this case, they have a defenseman like Dylan DeMello, for most teams, who's going to end up being a third pair guy, a depth player, but a pretty decent right shot defenseman, can certainly lug you 15 to 18 minutes a night. So he might be an attractive piece later on. You've also got experienced forward Mikhail Bodker, who they brought over from the Sharks in that Mike Hoffman trade, which really did not turn out overly well. Bodker was, okay last year, but not great. He's been injured off and on, and so far this year he's been a healthy scratch most of the time. He did get some playing time, which I believe was a case to try to showcase him to see if he could have a couple of good games and maybe attract some trade interest, but that seems to really did not work out here as of yet. So I think they certainly would like to move those two players. I think Bodker definitely doesn't return regardless if he's traded or not. I guess DeMello is kind of a wait and see approach. They also have unrestricted free agent Jean-Gabriel Pageau, but I think he's more likely to stay. He's still relatively young and could be a big piece of the future, so I can see them wanting to extend him and keep him in the fold here as they go along with a lot of their younger players. He can certainly be a leader, even though he's not, overly old himself. He's obviously older than a lot of the 20, 21-year-old kids that they have on the roster, or, waiting for their chance in the American Hockey League right now. So certainly continue to watch the Senators. They are expected to be making a fair bit of trades like they have been over the last year or two, but something's likely going to give here in the short term. Now, the Buffalo Sabres are obviously having a pretty good start to their season. There was a lot of talk previously about Rasmus Ristolainen, and I've obviously mentioned before, in case you missed it, that he's likely not going to be traded anymore, even though he did publicly ask. Even though it was confirmed, he did ask for a trade out of Buffalo under new head coach Ralph Kruger, and the fact that the team's doing better. He seems to be quite happy right now, and it's kind of wanting to stick around. So Ristolainen likely is not going anywhere. Obviously, the Sabres are in a situation where they do have a lot of defensemen, and I don't think they're going to be in a huge hurry here, but at the same time, they have a couple of guys on injured reserve who's going to be coming back soon and then counting against their cap, which is going to cause them some cap issues, and somebody likely will have to be moved as a cap casualty between either being trades or demotions or something will have to give here when they want to activate defenseman Brendan Montour and Zach Bogosian, who have been out for quite some time. So obviously they have a lot of other defensemen. They picked up even more in the offseason than Colin Miller and Henry Okaharu. And now that Ristolainen seems to be in the mix, of course you get Rasmus Dahlin. Really take a look at that. That's a pretty solid top 6 right there once you get everybody back in place. You do need some extra depth for longer term in case of injuries. Of course, you want to go into playoffs with ideally 7 or 8 defensemen that are capable of playing. playing. So Jason Botterill's not in any hurry. He's really preaching some patience here and indicating that he doesn't really wish to move somebody. But like I said, the salary cap kind of dictates a little bit here what he's going to have to do. And it makes a lot of sense that they would likely move defenseman Marco Scandella when the opportunity presents itself. Now, Scandella's a pending unrestricted free agent. Based on their cap situation and their blue line, it doesn't make sense that they would bring him back next year. I think he would likely be on the move regardless, either as a trade or as a free agent next summer. So why not move him while you can get some assets for him? It's a tough thing to really think about right now where they've been doing pretty well. So I don't think they're really, like I said, in a huge hurry. But once those other guys are ready to be activated, they're going to have to do something here. Scandella's the type of defenseman who's not making a ton of money. He's making just over $4 million. He's got a lot of experience. He's 29, like I said. So really, overall, I think he would be a pretty attractive piece to a lot of teams out there. There's always teams out there looking for defensemen. So now it's expected that he would be the guy who'd likely be on the move. Now, I also want to touch quickly on Washington Capitals goaltender Braden Holtby, who we've talked about a couple of times off and on over the last 3, 4, 5 months as a potential goaltender who could be changing teams next year. He's a pending unrestricted free agent, making about $6 million. The Washington Capitals, because of their cap situation between him and Nicholas Backstrom, are their two big contracts coming up after this year, and I don't think they're going to be able to afford to keep both, and it makes sense that Holtby would be the guy to go. I mean, I've talked about this before, but really now that they've seen young goaltender Ilya Samsonov really step up and play extremely well in the games he's played this year, that should make them that much more comfortable in doing so. Now, I don't expect anything imminently here on Holtby. Obviously, it's a situation where the Capitals are doing pretty well. They get a 7-2-2 record. They're not going to mess with anything too much here. I think if anything, we'll see a situation where Samsonov will likely get more playing time possibly as we move forward. Holtby will have an opportunity to continue working on things and trying to get his game back in order. Except a starting goaltender of that magnitude is really tough to trade during the season. He joins a growing list of veteran netminders like Jonathan Quick and Corey Schneider, of guys that are really having a tough time to start the year. Save percentage of .884 and a goals against of 3.6, whereas Ilya Samsonov numbers are really much stronger and played much better so far. So I do expect Holtby to likely not be with the Capitals beyond this year. I'm just not sure that we're getting this kind of situation where we're going to have a trade just yet. They've also got Phoenix Copley down in the minors, and he's got 2 more years on his contract as well. So really, if Samsonov becomes the starter a longer term, then you get Copley who could return as the backup. They could have themselves a pretty solid goaltending duo for significantly less money with Holtby out of the picture. So it's certainly going to be a way for them to save some money. I'm just not sure exactly when something like that's going to take place. He could end up walking as a free agent next year, because if the Capitals continue playing strongly and being a playoff contender like they're expected to be, it's going to be tough to trade. I just don't think his future will be with the Capitals for much longer. So let us all your latest updates here for today. Of course, as always, want to know your thoughts and opinions and everything we discussed here today. Let me know what you think, and we'll continue the conversation down in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.